Welcome, Jono. Thank you for joining us. We're going to use some of that empathy that Arun was talking about, and maybe, as I like to say, a little bit of fortune telling, and we're going to do a little bit of a look ahead into the future. So the way that developers learn, the way they adopt, the way they champion products is shifting quickly. I think we can all agree with that. Obviously, with AI-assisted onboarding, developer data as a go-to-market asset, seems like things are changing on a daily basis these days. So here to do his best Nostradamus impression and guide us through what's coming, and the community strategist and author and founder and CEO of Stateshift is Jono Bacon. So Jono is a leading community and collaboration speaker, author, and podcaster. He's the founder and CEO of Stateshift, as I said, where he does ride shotgun with tech companies and helps them break the mold and build thriving user and developer ecosystems. Jono, we're looking forward to hearing from you today about the trends to watch for in 2026. So I will toss it over to you, and I believe you're going to share your screen with us.
Yeah, let's do this. Thank you, Sean. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. And thank you for inviting me to come and speak. All right, let's see if we can get the magic happening. All right, great. A black screen. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Perfect. So, hey, everyone. As I go through this, I've got a lot to get through in the next 30 minutes. So feel free to get your questions into the chat. Let's make this as interactive as possible so we're not just listening to me drone on. By way of an introduction, I really sucked when I was at school. I got mainly C's and D's. A good example of this, when I did PE, there was a lot of passive aggressive kind of reports from my teachers, like he has performed reasonably well. He has a reasonable understanding of the skills. He is reasonably competent. Really wasn't very good at school. When I was 19, my brother installed Linux on my computer, and I was mesmerized by the idea of it. I went and bought this book because I worked in a bookshop, and I learned that people from all over the world come together to write software together. And so let's see if this works. So when I was 19, I bought this book, and in it talked about how people all over the world kind of come together to build software together, and I was mesmerized by the concept of this. So some years passed, went to Ubuntu, I went to Canonical and led the community team where we built the global Ubuntu community, then to XPRIZE, then to GitHub. And throughout this time, wrote some books, People Powered. I'll skip through this, and then The Art of Community. And these days, I run a company called Stateshift. We were thrilled to sponsor this event today. And essentially, what we do is we ride Copilot with our customers, and we help them to build amazing developer engagement. So let me go through these 6 areas where I think developer adoption is gonna really focus moving forward. The first one is bad news for those of you who love forums. I think they're going to go away. Right? I think that the nature of how we provide support in community forums is going to significantly change. Back in the old days of tech, we used to buy books, right? Like the PHP cookbook. We all became fans of O'Reilly. Then documentation became pretty prevalent in developer projects. But the problem with this was that you had to take all that information and somehow tune it to what your problem was, right? And this is where community forums came in. So people would join these forums, they'd ask a question. If there was a friendly developer hanging out there, they'd answer your question and you'd be off to the races. And this is how many of these communities formed. But what always struck me as a problem with these community forums was they were very transactional in nature. It was primarily about providing support. Not everybody wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm going to go and help someone on the internet, right? So I actually think this is a good thing because what's going to happen is we're going to change the nature of communities. Communities are going to shift and adjust to areas that aren't purely transactional support. And the reason why this is going to happen is because why would you go to a forum and ask a question when you can just go here? We can go to ChatGPT, you can ask a question, and you're going to get a response, and then you can go and reply to the response around exactly what you're trying to solve. This is how developers tend to operate, and I think this is going to become more and more prevalent moving forward. We're also, I think, going to see a shift towards different modalities of interacting and engaging with AI. So, for example, there's a company that is a customer of ours at Stateshift called Anam, and they do a phenomenal job in providing real-time avatars. So if you think about it this way, if you can go to documentation and there's an avatar sat there, and you can talk to it with your microphone, and that's loaded up in all the context of your product or your project, it's a much more interactive and engaging experience. In fact, one of the pieces of feedback I gave to them when we started working with them as a customer was people should be able to learn about Anam by talking to Anam. And that's why they have an avatar on the front page of the website. Okay, so what do we take away from this is developers want to get to feedback and responses as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And the nature of going and just asking a question on a forum, I think is going to change, right? Community forums will still exist, but I think they're going to be much more about the product and sharing experiences and best practices, which honestly make better communities, all right? The second one here is we're going to say goodbye to Google and say hello to ChatGPT as well. Now, what I mean by this is if you look at just over the first year of ChatGPT, we saw this ridiculous level of growth. Well, where we all tried really properly decent AI for the first time because AI sucked before that. And now ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your chatbot of choice is, has become hugely prevalent. And I don't know about you folks, but I'm using it. I'm using these tools every single day. So what does this mean when it comes to developer engagement? Well, what we want to do is we want to create an outcome like this, right? So this is a tool that we use, and you can see this is a ChatGPT thread, how to build engaged developer communities that drive product adoption. You can see here right at the top, Stateshift is appearing. This is my company. How have we done this? Well, what we're doing is we're using tools like Otterly and Peak, where we can track the performance of how much our brand is appearing and how much our content is appearing inside of the LLMs, right? People are not going to necessarily go to your blog and read. So what's going to happen here is developers are going to go to ChatGPT or wherever, and they're going to expect to find your content. So how do you go about doing this? Well, honestly, what you do is you create more blog content, you put it out there because these LLMs are indexing based on your blog content, but you have to create this content in a very specific way. And like I said, you can use tools like Peak. This is an example of where we started really playing around with this. We've been doing this with our customers for a while, but we started doing this fairly recently. And you can already see the increase in the visibility. The faded lines here are our competitors, right? And you can see already how we're starting to see some improvements in here, okay? So we have to change the mindset from going to community forums to ask questions and just going to developer documentation. Developers are going to be coming to chatbots to go and get help and solve problems. This won't replace the developer adoption or the developer community experience or the developer relations experience, but it's going to replace how people solve problems. And we have to start thinking about this right now, okay? All right, now the third one I want to talk about here is that belief is going to become a competitive mode. So I'm going to ask everybody a question. I want you all to answer this, right? We're going to play a little bit of a game here. Remember those old video games? Well, imagine we have a matchup, right, between two different brands. We've got Atlassian and GitHub, right? Now, which of these two brands do you think developers just feel the greatest sense of connection to? Which of these two brands do you think has the greatest level of mind share, right? Yeah, GitHub. Dorothy, Mandy, Dawn, Jason, Calais, Rohini, you're all saying GitHub. Exactly, right? We just know instantly that GitHub just has more of a connection to developers. Why don't we look at, for example, Braintree versus Stripe, right? Who has the greatest level of connection to developers? I would say Stripe. If we look at Fedora versus Ubuntu, I'm a little biased here, but I would say Ubuntu as well. And I'm biased because when I was leading the community team at Canonical, building Ubuntu, we built a community of 60 million users. We had about 300,000 active contributors. Our community translated Ubuntu into 100 languages. We have 300 local user groups. It got to a point where people were literally tattooing the Ubuntu logo on their arms, which was a problem when we changed the logo. Kind of pissed a lot of people off. So let's go back to GitHub. Like, why GitHub? Why does GitHub have that prevalence as compared to Atlassian? Atlassian have got great people and good products and lots of money. The reason why is because they've designed their brand positioning around building a belief system. If you think about big brands, Nike, Apple, GitHub, whatever, they're not just brands where you think they make that product. They're brands where people feel a sense of belief. They feel part of that. Apple people consider themselves to be, like, people who have iPhones and Apple Watches, I'm one of them, consider themselves to be Apple people. GitHub users consider themselves to be GitHub users, right? So the way in which we do this is we have key ingredients that sit inside of that brand positioning, right? You have a creation story. Think about the founders of Apple. They Wozniak and Jobs, they started out with the Homebrew Compute Club. That story builds a sense of connection. You create a creed. A creed is basically the principles. Think about it with GitHub. Code belongs to everybody. AI amplifies human creativity. Collaboration over competition. Open source drives innovation. I just wrote these up as an example for GitHub. These are the principles that when we feel connected to them, we feel connected to the brand. If we look at the non-believers, like who are our opposition here, right? The traditionalists who stick with legacy version control systems, the control freaks who only want one closed proprietary platform, right? This is the opposite of what we want. Sacred words, think about GitHub, the term pull request, the concept of social code, and this was all popularized by GitHub. These are shortcuts. When you know the term pull request, you feel part of the club, right? So the reason why I think this is going to be crucial is because what we've seen in the last 2 years, I would say, is an explosion of companies who want to go out there and engage with developers. And that's resulted in an unbelievably noisy market. And when you have a noisy market, you have to cut through that market. This is, again, one of the things that we do with companies when we kick off with Stateshift is we go and build this brand positioning for them. Because when you have these pieces right, what it does is it differentiates your social media content, your blog content, YouTube, whatever. You stand out from the crowd, okay? And if you think about what I've said so far, then it means that the content that you create that goes into the LLM stands out from the crowd, okay? So all of these pieces kind of get connected. Now, the fourth one here is building a little bit on what Arun was talking about earlier on, is what we say TTV in 10 minutes, right? Now, what does TTV stand for? TTV stands for time to value. It's how quickly does someone get an outcome when they start using your product, right? One of the things we see, because 98% of the companies we work with are companies who have a developer tool or a developer product. And the first thing we look at is developer experience when we start working with them. And in many cases, it takes too long to get to a result, right? We're inspired by Microsoft's approach. Back in the old days of Microsoft, when software came in boxes, they had a rule that said when you take the shrink wrap off a box, you have to be able to do something useful, not just install it, useful within 10 minutes. Okay, and it was a really nice way in which Microsoft could frame the challenge of how to deliver time to value really quickly. Arun said 5 minutes. I'm saying 10 minutes. To Arun's point, this is all somewhat symbolic. The principle is quick, right? Whether it's 5 minutes or 7 minutes or 8 minutes, it doesn't really matter. It's just about getting to value quickly. Let me give you an example of a company that we work with. In how to kind of do this. What you do is you look at the onboarding experience as a funnel, right? As a pipeline. A company that we work with, they had a few stages in what they were doing. So first of all, someone would sign up for a new account. Then people would go through their quick start guide. Now, we evaluated whether they'd done this in terms of API calls. If someone had sent 5 to 10 API calls, they'd probably gotten through the quick start guide. We're measuring all of this in post-hoc. If someone had gotten to 100 to 600 API calls, they're probably rolling out proof of concept. If they're over 600 API calls, they're probably into production. And then it's at that point you convert those people into customers, right? The first thing we look at when we work with companies like this is this piece, right? Going from new account to getting through, like just doing something. This is time to value, right? Now, how do you get people to sign up for that new account? This is the first step of the process. It's all about saying that you are a big prize that people are going to love to have, right? And this is all about the landing page. Landing page to sign up is crucial, right? Now, the reason why I'm putting this in as a prediction in these 6 predictions for 2026 is I think more and more people are going to systemize the science of how to do this, right? When we work with companies, often a lot of companies will say, this is kind of new. We've never really done something quite like this before. I think this is going to become commonplace. Let me give you an example of a company we work with when we went through this, right? There's a company called Zep. They've got a great product for agent-based memory. This was their original landing page. You can see here, there's a little picture of me in the corner. This is because when we work with companies, we'll do like really hands-on reviews and feedback. We'll create content for them. And this was a Loom video that I sent over to them. In that Loom video, I identified 1, headline wasn't strong enough. 2, too many call to action buttons. 3, you can't see a demo of the product. 4, social proof looks good. 5, it's great to see some statistics around the benefits of using Zep, right? I then sent over some recommendations for some changes to how they'd optimize the page, and this is what they ended up with, right? They pretty much modeled the structure that I'd sent over. The key thing here that encourages people to sign up is 1, there's contrast from hallucinated to accurate, from slow to instant, right? You can see the difference. 2 is that it's a streamlined set of call to action buttons. Like it's clear what you're supposed to do next if you like the idea of this. 3, you can see a demo in less than a minute, or just over a minute rather. This is something we always say to everybody, like people don't want to scroll when they land on your website. Show how it works in a minute. We kept the social proof and we kept the statistics. Saw a significant increase in people going from sign up into that first experience, right? Then what happens is if we go back to the pipeline, we break it down into conversion, right? From the new account to that quick start completion, about 70% of people were getting through it when we made these changes. And then it dropped down to 30% of the proof of concept. Then it dropped down to 10% of people would get to the production usage. And then less than 2% people became customers. So when you look at something like this, you want to say to yourself, okay, where do we focus our efforts next, right? We've fixed the landing page. This is where we look. Why is there a huge drop off from 70% to 30%, right? And we want to be really systematic in how we improve this. And this is where you explore things like email nurture and improving documentation, integrating intercom into your docs. Like, these are all things that we did that then went and improved those stages. What this is basically how marketing people improve funnels, but we're now starting to see more of that coming into developer relations and to developer experience. And this, I think, is going to be a crucial element of how we move forward, right? So let me move now on to our fifth one. And this is where I think we're going to see a big shift away from step-by-step guides, right? So I'm going to go through these last couple. I'm going to blast through these last couple. And then what I want to do is I want to kind of open this up to some questions. Let's make this a little bit more interactive. So if you think about it, you know, when you find a developer product or a developer tool, typically what happens is, like in the previous example, there's a quick start guide. You kind of go there, you look at the quick start guide, you kind of go through it. But that's all going to change because we have this, right? Like, why would I necessarily want to go and read through a bunch of static documentation? Because the problem with that static documentation is that we have to go and like make sure that when we write that documentation, it's in the right order, and people are going to be joining at different stages. Some people may be brand new to your tech. Some people may need a primer around how it works. Some people may be a little bit further along. People may have a different set of requirements and challenges that they're facing. And you've got to figure that out up front when you're creating your documentation, right? I think AI is going to change all of this. And let me give you a simple example of how quickly you can implement a win for this. So one of our customers is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. If you're not familiar with them, they're a big foundation that basically has a huge chunk of cloud native software. People come together to build cloud native software that serve a variety of different use cases. They're a phenomenal organization. They're part of the Linux Foundation. One of the things I was talking to the executive director about was they've got tons and tons of benefits, right? That when you become a member, so you become a silver member, a gold member, a platinum member, you get all these benefits, and there's different member benefits are available for different tiers. And one of the challenges that they face is making their members know what benefits are available and what's right to them, right? So what's interesting about this is that it's basically an onboarding issue, right? When somebody becomes a member. So my proposal to Jonathan was, why don't we just load all that context into AI, and then AI can guide them through that journey? And I mocked something up in literally less than 10 minutes to demonstrate this. Let me give you an example of this. So my personal preference is Claude when it comes to chatbots for various boring reasons. But basically what I did is I loaded in the member benefits deck, and then I created a prompt that basically walks the user through the journey. So the first thing it does when we kind of go into role play mode is it says, what's your current membership situation? So I typed in my membership level is silver, goals are thought leadership, lead gen, brand recognition, et cetera, et cetera. Then it says, okay, validate some of the things that I've been talking about. Then it says, what's your biggest challenge in reaching your target audience? So I say, okay, getting awareness out there, lots of AI noise, how to cut through it, you know, show that there's some genuine value here. It also asked me if I was going to be going to KubeCon, and I added that in there. And then what my prompt does is it basically says, okay, based on all of those member benefits, it says priority number 1, focus on the online programs. This is what it is. This is why it matches your needs. It directly addresses cutting through AI noise by positioning you as a genuine technical expert. And then step-by-step instructions to how to activate that benefit. And then it goes through the other 2 priorities. So it lifts all of the cognitive load around what we need to do to unlock that benefit, right? Now, I mocked this up in less than 10 minutes. Imagine if for your developer product, your developer tool, you just had this sitting on your website, right? So this is the kind of thing where I think AI is going to significantly shift the nature of how we bring developers in and we lower friction, because to me, all of this is about lowering friction. Paul in the chat is saying, hey, Jono, with the rise of AI, do you think in-person communities will become more important and valuable to developers? Yes, I do. What's interesting to me about community building, and I've been doing this for about 27 years now, is we need to optimize the body language, right? So, you know, Sean's got his camera off right now, but if Sean had his camera on, I'd be able to see his body language. Like when you get on a Zoom call, when you meet people in person, the most effective way of building human relationships is to meet them in person, to stand next to them, ideally with a beer in your hand, right? It's my personal preference. But the best way of doing this online is we can do it in online sessions where people got their camera on. This is one of the reasons why when I run sessions at Stateshift, I ask people to turn their cameras on at the beginning of the session because you get more value out of the session. So I think we're going to go away. We're going to move away from like transactional, I have a question, can you give me an answer, to much more experience and knowledge sharing. I think it's going to be way more compelling. All right. Monica's saying, do you think traditional docs will change to start with a chatbot? Yeah, absolutely, Monica. Going back to what I mentioned earlier on and how we have to reframe blog posts to get indexed into the LLMs, you've got to do a very specific set of things on your infrastructure as well as in the way you create and format your content. A good example of this is put frequently asked questions on your blog content, because that's how chatbots learn. Okay, this is the kind of stuff, like I said, when we work with people at Stateshift, this is how we guide them through it. Okay. Now, let me move on to our final one here, is that I think DevRel is going to go through quite the shift, right? In how companies bring in DevRel people and how companies will evaluate DevRel for success, right? So right now, when we tend to think of DevRel, we tend to think of things like people going to conferences like KubeCon, doing talks at those conferences, speaking at meetups and things like that, right? Creating content, doing social media. It tends to be a lot of engagement, frontline interaction with developers, and content creation, right? Those tend to be what we think about when it comes to developer relations. But there's a bit of a nightmare that we see that occurs. And we see this with a lot of companies. Typically, it's before we come in and help. This is when the founders reach out. Let me kind of illustrate this with everybody's favorite movie, Shrek, okay? So what happens is DevRel joins a company. They've got a broad mandate to go out there and engage developers. So what do? They start delivering practical work. They do blogging, they do social media, they do documentation, events, all that kind of good stuff, right? Then about a year passes, right? And someone at the company, an exec, says, what's the ROI of all of this stuff, right? Like, why are we hiring this person to go out there? We're spending a ton of money on them going to conferences, and, you know, I see them doing really good stuff and they're really nice and they're really friendly, but like, what are we getting out of this? Should we maybe take that money and put it into marketing or sales or ads or something else that's a bit more predictable when it comes to getting results? So then the question is, okay, how have we been measuring all of this stuff? The DevRel person then says, well, you know, we've got this many views in the blog and we've been to this many conferences and we've been doing this. And then what happens is that doesn't sufficiently explain the ROI, and the DevRel gets fired, right? This is the sad story that we see a lot of the time. The reason why this is a problem is because in many cases, the metrics piece that you can see there is focused on vanity metrics. It's not connected into the impact on the business. And this results in a deeper issue. The deeper issue is that when it comes to metrics, there's a lot of baggage around metrics and measuring. Because usually it instills a fear of kind of being exposed, looking stupid, losing control, being imperfect, maybe getting fired if the results don't look very good. I experienced this when I was at Canonical. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but when I was at Canonical, I didn't measure stuff because I was worried about how it was going to reflect on me and the team, right? Mainly me. This was an ego thing. This has got nothing to do with my team. The team was great. And it was silly, right? But the only way to do great work is to measure reality regularly. But metrics, this is a key thing. Metrics are not reality. They're just a reflection of it. Just because a graph's going down, it doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that what we need to do is we need to address signal and understand the signal so we can improve. And this signal is crucial, right? This is where we need to really focus, okay? So let me give you an example of this. In the early days of this millennia, I guess, there was the dot-com boom, right? Basically, we had this big spike, and then it dropped down and everybody lost their shorts, right? One person who seemed to be pretty immune to this was this guy, Warren Buffett. And the reason why he was relatively immune to this is because he had a certain set of signals that he was tracking that were incredibly boring. Things like consistent earnings and free cash flow, Does the company have a durable competitive advantage? Is there return on equity? Do they have a rational management team? Do they have low levels of debt? So if you look at the same time frame when the dot-com boom happened, Berkshire Hathaway, his company, were doing reasonably well, right? So what we need to do is we need to use metrics to observe what's happening, but we don't use them to define what should happen, right? So the way in which we look at this, and this is how I think DevRel is going to shift, is DevRel is going to first of all look at the business growth, then the developer onboarding, and then the engagement. Right now, what we tend to see is a lot of focus on engagement, content, events, this, that, and the other. I think what we're going to start seeing is as measuring the right things in terms of business growth. So instead of, just looking at the number of customers, it doesn't matter how many customers you got. If you've got 1,000 customers and they'll pay you $1, it doesn't matter anything. It doesn't matter at all. What really matters is revenue, right? So then what we do is we look at the developer onboarding. Okay, who cares how many people sign up for our product? That doesn't matter. It's a vanity metric. What we care about is active users, and then we care about that connection into revenue, right? If we look at engagement as an example, who cares how many views your video gets? What we really care about is watch time. How many people are watching your videos? How many people then becoming active users, and then how many people are becoming customers, right? Let me illustrate this with a quick example, right? This is my YouTube channel, right? In 1 month, I got 28,000 views. This is not breaking the internet. This is not challenging Mr. Beast's throne, okay? And it's easy to look at that and be kind of underwhelmed by it, and you should be underwhelmed by it, right? But what I really care about is this, watch time, 777 hours in 1 month, right? Now, why does this matter? Because this means that one person was watching every minute of every day in that month. That means that we also get one new subscriber every 3 hours of every day. So 28 hours, 28,000 views, which is the vanity metric, doesn't matter. The watch time is what really matters, right? And when you track this kind of stuff, this is an example of some tracking that we've done with one of our customers. Then you can identify, like, why did we see this spike here? Why did this drop here? Why did we see a sudden rise here? Okay, and the bit I want to kind of pull this into the finish line with one other element that I think is going to shift with developer relations, because I think this pulls all of the things I've talked about together into view. Is I often hear these kind of statements like, I'll never work with someone in marketing, they just don't get developers, or sales is so gross, I want nothing to do with it, or the product team is so arrogant, they don't know our users and what they want. Our DevRel people just go to conferences and grow their personal brand and hang out with their friends. These are the kind of things I often hear in companies. And what's interesting to me is marketing, sales, product, DevRel, these are the criticisms, they're leveled towards other teams. One thing I think we're going to start seeing as a big shift here as well, as I pull this into the finish line, is there's really kind of three teams in a company, right, that relate to this work. There is the marketing team, which tends to do awareness and brand and funnels and lead gen. There's the sales team that is lead gen, problem solving, revenue growth. There is the product team, which is focusing on onboarding, product value, and wins. DevRel sits right in the middle, right? And it has to sit right in the middle. It has to have skills when it comes to funnels, when it comes to onboarding, and when it comes to lead gen. And when you do this well, you get really great results. So I'll wrap up there. If you need help with how you can build great developer engagement around your company, come and check out Stateshift. You can go to stateshift.com and feel free to go and book a free blind spot review, and we'll go from there. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Jono. That was great. We're going to have you come back in a year, and we're going to determine which of your predictions came true. But yeah. I appreciate it. We always love to have you on. So thank you again for your time.